The first architects who worked in Cuba during colonial times were brought from Spain. Originally, their main type of designs were military and religious. The military were for defending against pirate attacks like El Morro, La Cabaña, La Fuerza, El Torreón, La Muralla de La Habana, which was a fortified wall surrounding the city, and others. Religious buildings were plentiful, like the Havana Cathedral with its rich Baroque ornamentation, El Templete, where the first mosque in America took place, and many, many others. With prosperity, architects were in demand for designing mansions and other types of buildings. Stone and wood were the main materials used. The architectural styles used replicated the buildings in Spain. As time passed by, other European trends started being introduced in Cuba, such as Renaissance, Gothic, Neoclassicism, Moorish, and others. The introduction of light cast ornamentation and colored glass contributed to the majestic looks of the facades of the buildings that are admired today. Structural steel and reinforced concrete brought to the world a new phase in architecture. The first skyscrapers, which were built in Chicago, New York, and in other cities, were models for the advancement of the modern era in Cuba. The intervention of Cuba by the United States from 1898 to 1902, after the defeat of Spain in the Spanish-American War, brought to the island in a short period of time changes that had not been experienced during colonial times. American banks, investors, construction companies with new construction systems started arriving for the first time, as well as publications that brought new ideas. Architecture had not been taught in Cuba during the colonial era. In 1902, the School of Architecture and Engineering was founded in the University of Havana. Its graduates had the dual title of engineer and architect. Cuban architects that had studied abroad started to return to Havana with new design ideas. Art Nouveau arrived in Cuba around 1905, Art Deco around 1920. The architecture that was being done in Cuba at this time, especially in Havana, became very prominent worldwide. At a point in time, Havana was seen as the Rome of the Americas. By around 1950, the School of Architecture at the University of Santo Tomás de Villanueva was also founded, adding a second school of architecture. Modernism officially arrived in Cuba in 1947, when the architecture students at the University of Havana revolted against classicism that was being taught by the professors. Following as text the treatise on architecture by Giacomo Barozzi da Vignola. As part of their revolt, the students burned all the copies of the Vignola book and declared their affiliation with the International Congress of Modern Architecture, better known as CIAM, that had been founded in 1928 and was led by Le Corbusier. They also adopted the ideas of the Bauhaus movement, which was being led by Walter Gropius. At this time, modernism was being introduced all over the world. Now, simplicity, less ornamentation, the sincerity in the expression of the materials, and form follows function were seen as the utmost in architectural expression. In Cuba, among the architects that introduced this movement were Frank Martinez, Antonio Quintana, Bosch and Romagnach, Nicolás Quintana, Max and Enrique Borges, Gelabert and Navia, Raúl Álvarez, Henry Gutiérrez, and some others. This century saw the visit to Havana of some world-renowned architects like Walter Gropius, Ludwig Misch van der Rohe, Philip Johnson, and others. Some of them designed very prominent buildings. McKim, Mead and White, designed the National Hotel in Havana. Kenneth Mackenzie Murchison, the Havana Central Train Station. Harrison and Abramovitz, the USA Embassy. Igor Polayevsky, the Riviera Hotel. And Welton Beckett, the Havana Hilton Hotel. Richard Neutra designed a very modern house in Havana in association with a young Cuban architect, Raúl Álvarez, who would become very prominent in Cuba. How did architecture evolve in Cuba from eclecticism to modernism?
What we have was a communication explosion with the architects all over the world, with Corbusier in France, Oscar Niemeyer in Brazil, and we had several magazines with pictures of the buildings all over the world. There was a shock because there were architects who had studied abroad, or you had very important architects of the world coming to do projects in Havana. We had a tremendous influx of information about modern architecture from all over the world coming into Havana. And remember that we were not looking back, we were looking forward. We had also excellent structural engineers who had the most modern systems that could be applied to the buildings, and that's how the Foxa building was built as still the largest residential project made out of reinforced concrete in the world. There was no looking back. There was a small group of architects who wanted to create a Cuban architecture by using the patio, the stained glass, the persianas, the wooden blinds, but there was no way that we could use that if you were doing a multi-story building.
Was there a transition, like from eclecticism through Art Nouveau and Art Deco before going into modernism? Because I remember some extraordinary buildings in Art Deco that are still there today, but Art Deco is not modernism.
No, but we were moving very fast. It went through the different phases. We didn't even look back. on uncharted territory.
What did you think about the eclectic architecture in Cuba when you were a student? How did you see those buildings? How did you visualize them?
Remember, the architect needs to have a very powerful imagination for creation. And everybody wants, even if it is a house, need to be different to whatever you had designed before, or it's been designed before. And we enjoy what we were doing, and being very happy with the motivations that give you the architecture all over.
When you were walking through the portals in Havana and you were under those magnificent buildings that everybody treasures now and that are decaying right now, what did you think when you were looking at those columns and the friezes and the facades?
That what they did was part of the past, and they were done by the architect that at that time lived in an environment that promote that type of architecture. But when you are in a modern society and in a world that is moving at the velocity that we are moving on, you need to be in according with the time, designing according with that. You cannot go to the past to design because you don't feel and you are not able to understand how they design and how they arrive to that.
What were the students at the time looking forward to, like design? Who were the architects that they were looking at in the world?
Well, really, they were looking forward to the modern architects like Philip Johnson, the players of architects that are all throughout. Good architects in very many countries, in Brazil, in Mexico, all over.
So they were really looking at those architects like an inspiration source.
Right, that's the way that, how architecture and how the imagination works.
I remember that in my time they were looking towards Gropius, which was rather old, and Niemeyer and Van der
That's why
Rohe.
you mentioned Brazil. Niemeyer was definitely an architect to follow.
Le Corbusier, how about Le Corbusier?
The same thing.
What did you think about Frank Lloyd Wright?
In his time, he was tremendous, the best of his epoch.
But he was really not a very modernist architect when he started.
Well, but your evolution as you progress in architecture, like everything in life, and your thinking changed.
Today we have with us two architects who had a very prominent architectural firm in Havana from the years 1952 to 1961, Jose Gelabert and Rosita Navia. When you were studying architecture, who were the architects that you most admired?
Van der Rohe,
Paul Rudolph, and Richard Newton.
Why Paul Rudolph?
At that time, he was innovative. He was different, and also at that time it was Walter Gropius and Jose Luis Serra. They were the main architects at that time.
How about of older generation of Cuban architects? Did you admire anyone in particular of the old-time architects?
Well, we admire them because they start what we follow later, because they have to follow the Spanish rules, and for us it was easier to make change in the ideas.
So actually, both of you started in the new architecture, in the modern style of architecture. You never practiced old architecture, like Art Deco. You never practiced
No,
Art Deco.
we never worked in the old times.
How did architecture transition in Cuba from old architecture, let's say, including all the different styles, into modern architecture, modernism?
Well, the main advantage was the new publication, the coming of architects from outside that were, in some kind, they were modernists at that time, and we follow their ideas. As we follow the ideas in Cuba, for example, that were our two main guides in Cuba. For example, I remember Fran Martinez and Mario Romagnac, and they were the ones who started doing new modernism in our design and our ideas.
So Fran Martinez actually was before the time when you started practicing?
It was a short time, but it was before.
Before that.
I remember from the times I was at the university that I heard that a few years before there was like a big change. The students revolted and they took off all the books of ancient
Vignola.
architecture and burned them. That was
Vignola.
the burning of the
That
Vignola.
There was a lot of move of Vignola. That was the old, let's say, the old architecture. And some professors, they insist in repeat their ideas, their drawings, and then a group of architects